This is Gary Zaleski, the host of The Gary Zaleski Show, the podcast for those who want to discover that human fuel called passion and build the life they have always wanted to live. I've been a professional speaker, author, and licensed minister for over 30 years, helping people professionally and personally who are tired of being stuck in the pursuit for something more. My wife calls me the human defibrillator because I jumpstart tired hearts and those minds that have checked out. I want you to become emotionally and financially profitable without sacrificing your faith or family. This show, it's all about the people I've connected with all over the world. People who have changed my life with their resiliency to never, ever quit. Shared moments that became lessons learned and laughter that took my breath away. Join me now in discovering the life you have always wanted to live. There are those moments in your life, man, where you go, this is going to be different. And I'm telling you, today in this podcast, Z-Bomb, Zoom Bomb, whatever the bomb it is, it's going to be incredibly different. And I'm saying this for real. I got one of my best friends, if not my best friend, Dr. Scott Hagan, as my guest today. I have been waiting for this. And honestly, if you're a listener, just fasten your seatbelt. We don't know where this is going to go. I will tell you this, and I'm going to warn you. There might be moments when laughter begins to break out, and you won't know why. But stay with us in spite of it. Scott, bro, I know you're Dr. Scott Hagan to the world, but to me, you're Scott, my best friend. Bro, thanks for being on the Z-Bomb podcast, man. Thank you for being here.
No, Z, it is good to be here. I wish you would bring a little more caffeine to your opening there, a little more energy. I love you, bud. Anytime I get within 10 feet, even on a screen, you ignite my life, man. And so it's just great to be with you. Let's have fun.
Okay, man, we're going to have a lot of fun. But first of all, for all the audience members, I want them to know who Dr. Scott Hagan is. I mean, you can't capitalize it real, but you have had a whirlwind of a life. And who are you?
Well, it really begins when I was a pitcher for the Bobcats in 1972 in Little League.
Okay, another warning, sarcasm will be at its highest level, ladies and gentlemen.
I was a dominant pitcher for the Bobcats. If anybody from Bellevue, Washington is watching this, you please confirm in the chat box I was a great pitcher. Anyway, Z, I just turned 60, which I know is still a teenager to you. I'm living in your vapor trail. I am halfway to 120. I've married for 40 years, so I got some big round numbers this year. 11 grandchildren, 4 great kids. Not great grandchildren, 4 great kids. Produce 11 grandchildren.
You almost threw me there, bro. Great kids. And they are.
No secrets on the side. But they're wonderful. And so Karen and I are living really in a convergence of our life. I moved 27 times by the time I was 16. Grew up in Washington, Oregon, Colorado. We lived in our car sometimes. We lived kind of a chaotic life. My dad was just looking for work. It's not because he was in the military. He probably was running from a couple of responsibilities. I don't know. But we had a chaotic life. I went to a different school every September, K through 8th grade. So when you grow up with that kind of craziness, people say, how'd you get from point A to point B in your life? And I said, it was my childhood. I had a huge head start. They said, what was it? Money, education? I said, no, chaos. I said, when you are on a different plate for 8 years in a row, you either develop a lot of anger or you develop superpowers for connecting with strangers and people and settings. So since I've been in kindergarten, I've walked up and introduced myself to strangers in first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade. Zero familiarity. All that has played out in my adult life in a wonderful way. So it's good. We'll talk more about that later. Married a beautiful bride after all that movement. Was a youth pastor in a great church in San Jose. And then when I was 27, planted a church in Elk Grove, California. Started my writing career then and was writing for some national publications. And then was there 11 years, went to Grand Rapids, Michigan, big church of 5,000. I was 38 years old. I don't even listen to people who are 38. I have no idea why this church hired me at 38. A great 5 years in Grand Rapids. Again, massive growth. It was more for me, I think, than for the church. I mean that sincerely. And then step back in at 43 and pioneered another church or planted another church, then oversaw church planting. Finished my master's degree in that season, started my PhD at Gonzaga University, and loved learning. Taught as an adjunct for many, many years while I was pastoring. Love writing, love education. And then lo and behold, a huge pivot happened 6 years ago. I was invited to be the president of North Central University, a great school, great university, 93 years old. You actually worked there at one time years ago. Please don't let that diminish my role as president of the university that you once worked at. I didn't tell you what job he had. It could have been the cafeteria, could have been the classroom. No, the Z, you were a big impact.
Just don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, don't know. So I've been serving as the president there, and just serve on a lot of national academic and forums, and just have a wonderful opportunity I speak every weekend somewhere in the country and train leaders and love people and just do life, man.
Well, here it is. And listeners, you heard the download, and everything he said is absolutely, totally accurate, and a whole lot more. I know this guy. I've spent a lot of time with him, and many times when we hear it, like a bio like this, I mean, there are some people going, man, that guy's lucky. Man, is he lucky? He just went from one thing to the next thing, and this door opened, and then, man, he got more lucky, and then he was in the right place at the right time, and he got more lucky. Hey, Scott, how much of this is about being lucky?
Well, I tell people half your life is a result of legitimate good planning, and the other half you never see coming. How do you catch the stuff you never saw coming? And that is the hard skills, soft skills are deposited in the side that you never see coming. You can only strategize half your life. The other half, you have to catch it. You have to be resilient to bounce.
I got to hold it. Hold it, Scott. I'm doing it right now already. That's a Z-bomb. Boom. It just landed. Man, say that again, what you just said.
Yeah, I think just anecdotally about half our life is a result of good intentional strategy. I'm going to do this to do this. The other half of your life you never see coming. What separates people is their ability to catch it, catch the part that happens without warning. And some of that is a lot of adversity, your buoyancy. How do you capture failure and turn it into information? How do you capture a mistake and turn it into learning? How do you redistribute pain as comfort? That's the part that separates leaders, Z. And so I look at my life. I never saw you coming. When I met you at Yosemite Falls, back in the late 80s, I never knew you existed. Little did I know that you would become a significant figure for the rest of my life. Not a season, but for the rest of my life. And so you weren't a strategic relationship, but I caught you. So
there's so much here because this idea of fear, and I hear a lot of people talking about fear nowadays, Scott. And as president of North Central University, you became the president of that university, 6 years ago?
Yep.
During, I guess, probably one of the greatest pandemics of fear that ever hit this nation. Here you are in Minneapolis, Minnesota, downtown, at a Christian university, and now you're the president. And within a few blocks from you, something happened that was not forecast. How do you wade through that kind of fear?
Yeah, the first 2 years was like, hey, this is magnificent. There was great growth, financial and in enrollment. And then without warning, December 7th, 1941 happens. It's Pearl Harbor Sunday morning. The pandemic hit. And then a few moments after that, Floyd is killed. And within a matter of minutes, the city's burning to the ground. And just a few minutes after that, the whole world's caught fire. And it's just a few blocks from our school. And I had to navigate that without planning. But that's part of the other half of life you never see coming. How do you catch it? I don't mean how do you leverage it? That's manipulative. You don't want to be a clever leader. Anybody that compliments you and says you're clever, that is not a compliment. Because in order for somebody to be clever, they've had to, at the expense of somebody, achieve. You don't want to be clever. You want to be wise. You want to be courageous. But I mean, there was no way to prepare for George Floyd. And really, it wasn't just the death and the murder of Floyd. It was the Chauvin trial the next spring, Derek Chauvin, which was 2 blocks from my office. And the city is in barbed wire and concrete barriers and 1,000 National Guard with machine guns. And you're trying to have a residential campus recruit kids through the barbed wire. It was craziness. You can't sit there and overthink what's happening. You got to lead from the gut. There has to be a substantive amount of instinct that's been cultivated over time, that's been tested, refined, that lays there, that in 1 second activates. It's your instinct towards something. And I would say that the Lord has blessed us with so many great mentors and experiences that we had the right instincts in that moment to catch what we never saw coming and to translate that, not just translate that, but transfer that into distributed learning and peace and comfort for a lot of people during that time.
Here's what's really crazy, too, is I was with you, I believe, when you had the phone call. You were at my house.
Absolutely. You know, we were sitting in your backyard when I got the text about hosting the Floyd funeral.
And you know what? People hear these things on podcasts like this, and they go, yeah, okay, well, that's some powerful stuff. But it's the man behind it all when they're really facing it. It's like the emotion behind it. And what is that person really like when they're getting that information on real time? And I was there when you got that phone call about George Floyd and come on, folks, this is a university that was blocks from where the George Floyd murder took place, downtown. And you get the call going, okay, what do we do now, leader? What do we do now? And I will say this, Scott, I didn't see, and maybe it's just me, but I didn't see you gripped with fear and anxiety at that moment. I felt like you were more like, okay, what do I do next? What is the next step that I need to take? And is that part of the process of overcoming fear that becomes paralyzing? Sometimes people they think so broadly that it paralyzes them. I don't know.
Yes, Gary, I think that we get seduced into this path of intellectualism when we grow in leadership, especially if we've gone to school, served, got academic credential. We feel like we have to give a long answer to something. But in that moment where they called, it came down to one of 2 one-syllable words, N-O or Y-E-S.
Wow.
No or yes. You're not writing a dissertation. You're not writing a book that's going to be at Barnes & Noble or in the airport on leadership. Leadership is reduced oftentimes to 2 syllables. No, yes. And it comes down to something inside the gut that instinct. Now, I'm also a man under authority. I did call my executive committee of my board, and they said, how do you feel? I said, I think we'll be on the right side of history. There's a lot of theater right now, volatile political theater. When the dust settles and this all sorts itself out. So God has given me the ability of leadership to see the future. I could see past all of the intensity of the elections and all that. I could see into the future, and that we would be remembered as a kind university, not a political university, but someone who showed kindness. I had a guy call me from Harvard after the funeral, this black leader, intellectual leader, and he said, when I saw Floyd, this emblem of the streets, of the hood, laying in your house and being showed dignity, I couldn't believe my eyes. He said, it took 50% of the violence out of the country that day. The fact that you allowed George Floyd to lay in your house and rest for a few minutes and look like a human being after all that craziness. Now, for some people, they don't think he deserved that. I was a pastor. I'm not that sophisticated. You just try to help people. How can I help? So that was really the instinct. And I knew history, Gary, would serve us well. And so that helped me leap past and through the fear, because I really felt in my gut that people would see this for what it truly was motivated for, which was just a simple act of compassion, of love, and just to be genuine to help.
It wasn't complicated. It was yes or no.
Yeah.
It was a yes or no. And you said yes, you did have the funeral at the university, which was all over the country, on every news channel, all over the world, actually. And it was so amazing to actually watch it from the chapel of North Central University. And what a historical moment. What was it like for you to be there as the president of the university, that you said yes to actually having George Floyd's funeral at the university? How did that feel for you?
Well, because I've been a pastor for 38 years and I probably have performed 300 to 400 funerals, it still simply was a funeral being housed in a chapel. So I didn't think of it as a global event, a TV event, and I really didn't focus on that, Gary. I really did focus on the room, the kids, and the family members. And as long as I kept mentally there and my eyes stayed there and not at the TV cameras, I felt it was sincere and authentic and believable. So
let's talk about authenticity for a minute. And I'm going to go to a place where few have gone before, because many times I listen to podcasts or I listen to what other things, and people always bring their best foot. And I get it. We bring who we are, all the good things that we've done. We need that. But I also believe that there's people listening that's going, I can't achieve that where he's at. He has no idea where I am, because where I am right now, my fear and my anxiety is so deep inside of me. I live with it every single day. When I look into the future, I just see impossibilities. When I look to my past, I just see where I couldn't believe I'm going to blame them because of the way I was treated or what I should have been received from my past or whatever. So does Scott have any fear? Are there any fears inside of you that maybe you have faced or that you face now? Or are you just this fearless warrior, man, that you just nothing brings any kind of fear to you?
No, I definitely think that when you live halfway to 120, you've been in the public eye your whole life since I was, 19, started as a youth pastor. I think you do get enough reps in life that there's not a lot of things that truly shock you. They're surprising, but it's not like you didn't know it didn't exist. It just has never existed in your realm. So you do have a lot of ways to interpret life. But I will say this, I jotted down 3 things that I'm afraid of. And so here's the first one, Z.
Okay, folks, you better. I've never heard Scott. I've known Scott for many, many years. I've never heard this, so this could be some bombs here. All right, the 3 greatest fears of Scott Hagan.
Okay, and let me just say this about fear. For me, fear doesn't show up in this. I'm not shaking. You won't necessarily hear it in my quivering voice. I'm not hiding backstage, or I'm not just not showing up. That's not how my fear shows up. My fear shows up through insomnia. It's when I can't sleep.
Okay, that's real.
One of the great indicators is how much melatonin I need to fall asleep. And I have to be very truthful with myself when anxiety, which is that turning of the stomach and the inability to turn off the mind in such a way that rest. So for me, the fear indicator is how much insomnia is it creating in me as a human being. So here's what gives me insomnia, Z. I'm about to make a decision or do something. I get afraid that people I love will be adversely affected by this personal choice. Because
I know that about you.
The longer we live, our life is more entangled. I have not only 4 kids, I have 3 daughter-in-laws and a son-in-law and their families, and then those kids. So the entanglement, if you've been fruitful in your life and faithful, there is a heavy entanglement where people are affected by what you do. So I'll get afraid that this personal decision is going to somehow upset their life unexpectedly. And so I get afraid to make the choice because I don't want to run the gauntlet of having 100 conversations and 100 explanations in my life for why I just did what I did. So at this stage of life, having the energy and the willpower to run the gauntlet of examination of your life, man, dude, I get paralyzed and gives me anxiety. Here's the second thing I'm afraid of, gives me insomnia, is that my health will not match my aspirations, that my stamina and my energy and my blood pressure is going to fail me while my mind is still alive with the future. I get afraid that at 60 that I go, am I taking care of myself? Am I going to have a mind that's on fire with the future, but a body that can't get out of that chair? Now, I understand there's many times people's health is not self-inflicted, but most of the time it is, but sometimes it's not. And so I don't want to be judgmental of those who have an ailment that keeps them from feeling vital. But most people, because they haven't taken care of themselves, and you and I have lived in the public fast lane, we love life, we love people, we love speaking, we're speakers, we're communicators, Z. But man, will my health match this? And I get afraid, and then I'll be there and I'll lay there with insomnia, playing this out. That's how fear works in my life, as I can't sleep. And here's the third thing I'm fearful of: the Lord. I fear the Lord. That all of these
people, for people that are listening that might not have an idea what even remotely what that means, are you scared of God? Is he going to hurt you? Are you scared of him? Has he hurt you in the past? Is that why you're afraid of him?
I would say no, because I would have no one to blame but myself. I see the Bible as a book of promises, not a book of rules, but it's a book of promises. But I see it also, Jesus said so many things about this life and the next life. And if all these things are true, then I have a healthy, sober awareness that this is all true. And I am going to be accountable to the Father who loves me and has made a way for me to be in right relationship with him. But Z, I fear the Lord. I'm not fearful of him. When I have insomnia at night, it's not because I fear God's goodness and his mercy. It's because I'm breaking his heart, and it's keeping me up at night.
Wow. Here, Scott, I got to jump in here because I think there's an irony here, is that the one thing that fear does to you is rob you of the ability to find rest.
Yeah.
That you need rest. There is a common thread amongst leaders that I know that Sharice and I have worked with, and in the area of seeing restoration in their lives. And they all have one thing in common: they're exhausted, they're tired. I mean, they're not just tired; they are beyond exhaustion. And I will dare say that when you're tired, when you're physically tired, maybe you don't agree with this, but here's how I feel: when you're physically tired, the biggest lies that have ever been told make sense. You believe what's absolutely not true, either about yourself, about somebody else. How about this? About God. Because when your body and your mind and your spirit is tired and you're not getting the rest you need, it affects every other area of your life. And I just thought, first of all, thank you for your transparency, bro, because people would never believe, well, Scott Hagan, man, he just rock and roll. And you do, man. You have more energy than I could begin to imagine. But for you to get that transparent to say, man, the one thing fear does is rob me of my sleep. I went, yes, because there's a lot of people out there right now that are going, I totally and completely relate to that dude. So here's the obvious question. How do you get your sleep?
Yeah.
How do you get your rest?
It's a great, great question. I think the great fear story in the Bible that applies to everything that where fear wants to take us somewhere. You know the story well. If you've never read it in Scripture, I encourage you to find a Bible, find 1 Kings chapter 17 through 19. Story of Elijah. He is winning. The dude is winning. He wins on the top of Mount Carmel. He's with King Ahab. He's winning. And then he gets a phone call from his past. This woman named Jezebel. And I don't mean this in a gendered sense, but Jezebel is angry and says, if I don't do to you what you did to the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, and God actually did that to the prophets of Baal, by this time tomorrow. So what happens is something from your past comes up and slides in front of you. A voice from yesterday is right in front of you and delivers a deadline by this time tomorrow. So Elijah is out of time. Anxiety, insomnia, fear always tells you that you're out of time. You're out of choices.
Boom, boom, Z-bomb. Fear tells you are out of time.
Out of time. The clock has run out, pal, and you're done. So what he does is he runs. He runs a day's journey, which is 26 miles, according to Hebrew scholars, a marathon. He runs into the wilderness, and then it says he leaves his companion there. He breaks free from the last vital friendship and is now in total isolation in the middle of nowhere, because that's where fear takes us. We run and end up in the middle of nowhere, all alone. And it says he's too exhausted, what you said, to go on. And he tells the Lord, would you please help me die? That's where fear wants to take us ultimately, is isolation, total exhaustion, middle of nowhere. I just want to die. So
Scott, I know I got to interrupt. Thank you. That was amazing. Keep going. Keep going.
So when he's out there, the Lord obviously doesn't answer his prayer. He doesn't do a Dr. Kevorkian on this guy. He says, he comes down and he feeds him bread from some figs and gets him through the night. And when people are exhausted and isolated and in the middle of nowhere, they don't need long sermons. They just need help to get through the night. Then it says the next day, the Lord visited him again and gave him, and he said, he gave him the ingredients, but then Elijah prepared it. Gave him a little something to do himself. Not much. I went shopping for you. Hey, here it is on the counter. Make your own sandwich. Take a little effort, show a little basic responsibility. He does. And it says he went in the strength of that food for 30 days. We got to get him through the month now. I got you through the ninth. We're going to get you through the month. He gets to the cave and he says to the Lord, I alone am left. I was the only one. And the Lord says, man, your world's upside down, Elijah. There's 7,000 people that have not bowed their knee, because fear tells you you're out of time. You're in the middle of nowhere. I'm totally exhausted. And nobody sees what's real but me. And that's a false perspective. God says, I know you're tired. I know you're in the middle of nowhere. I know you're lonely. I know you're exhausted. But there's 7,000 people actually still that have not bowed their knee to Baal. And the Lord begins to put his thinking back in place. He comes in a still small breeze. He doesn't come in a hurricane, a fire, wind. He comes gently. And now he's healing his mind. He's not just restoring his body. And then he says, now go back and anoint the 5 kings. Get back on track, Elijah. And Elijah got back doing what he was supposed to be doing. So you see how God helps people through fear. It all started, he was afraid of Jezebel, afraid. The past has come back to the present. I'm afraid. And he runs, breaks relationship, middle of nowhere, wants to die. The Lord helps him through the night, comes the next day, gets him through the month, gets him to a cave, and helps screw his head back on, and helps his perspective, his worldview changes. So all that to say, the Lord has done that for me over and over and over again. Z, I've learned.
And so true. I got to say this for those of you. Those of you who are listening, listen, and you're thinking, oh, he's talking about the Bible. Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about the Bible. People say the Bible is boring. Many times it's not the Bible that's boring. It's the people that read it. They're the boring ones, okay? It's some of the greatest adventures ever. And I think, Scott, the thing that people fail to realize is it was at Elijah's greatest moment of victory. I mean, he had just one big time over and over again. And within like that, he forgot that he had won, and now he's afraid and running for his life. The same guy that was in this incredible leadership position, who had seemingly the heart of God in every way, this guy turns and he fails. He runs to the point where he wants to die. God didn't just give up on him. God didn't just say, well, good. Well, that's it. You know, you failed and therefore you die. God starts with our failures, man. He starts when we're at our lowest. He doesn't ignore us. He doesn't throw us away. He doesn't say it's your fault. He doesn't accuse us. He starts there. He starts there. And if we would just as human beings realize that God, it's not what God does to us, it's what God does for us and what he wants to do for us. If we could only get that, Scott, like you shared, it could, because you're close, man. Some of you are listening right now. You are so close to making a major, either horrendous decision, or you're really close to making an amazing one. Yeah. How do they make that amazing decision, Scott? How do they grab a hold and go, today I'm going to find the strength to make the right decision?
Well, for those who have a context of being faith-based and not fake-based, but faith-based, Christ, I have found, back to the things that I'm afraid of, will this personal choice adversely affect the people I love? I always make certain to include them early on. And I don't let them know my decision, Z. I let them know my thought processes. I welcome them in when I'm still holding two things in my hands. I don't just deliver them one final decision and announce to them. I let them know I'm in a process. I'm thinking about this so that they can begin to think about it. So my loved ones, I bring them into my thinking process and my organization as well, as best you can with confidentiality issues.
Exactly,
and so I don't feel like I'm moving secretly, that I'm just doing something independently. I feel like I have to make a decision, but I've brought my vital stakeholders into my world even while I'm still debating. I have found it works well for me to do that, so that then I can not have insomnia because I've made the decision, but it's not a shock to people. And then the other one is, when I've guarded my eating and my exercise, I don't lay in bed at night terrified that I'm gonna die of some crazy thing because I didn't steward my body well. It's hard, man. It's fast paced. All of our life revolves around food so much. I thought the tough decisions in life happen when you're young. No, the hardest decisions in life happen when we're older. We have to be more on top of our game than ever before. Man, I used to eat like crazy. Now I gain weight from toothpaste. It's just unbelievable.
Is that original there, Scott? Gain weight from
that is original. Yes,
oh
I have to moderate.
But I am going to be in control. I'm not going to let that laughter take over. So
yes.
You're talking about taking care. Moses has said that one of the last things that the Lord asked Moses to do, I think it was 120, was to climb Mount Moab. I think sometimes people, as they get older, say, Lord, how come you're not asking me to do more? And he goes, because you couldn't do what I'm asking. You're not physically, mentally, emotionally. You're not, you want me to do more. You want me to ask you to do more, but you haven't equipped yourself. You don't have the currency to do what I've asked you to do. And sometimes we don't want to get in shape enough for God to shape us. You know what I mean? And so I love the practical part of this whole thing, man. I mean, it's not like you're laying in bed at night going, I'm going to die. But at some point, as you get older, and I'm turning 71. And so just for the fun of it, I don't know how much, I Googled and I said, what's the average age of a white male in the United States of America? And Google doesn't know what they're talking about, okay? But the age came up at 76 years of age is the average age that guys like me live to. So my thought was, do I get better in shape or do I just live in the fate of that number? I'm staying in shape, bro, because I will not retire. I will refire.
The average lifespan in 1930 was 59.
Oh, wow. 59 years old.
So we're crushing it.
And age is a big...
Yes.
People say to me all the time, Gary, 70 is just an age. And I go, yeah, but it's my age. You know, it's my number, right? And I'm finding that some people, as you get older, it's not that people are ignoring you or people don't take you seriously or people see your age. It's you do. You see it. And when you are all about how old you are and or how maybe you're being ignored, and I think that no matter how old you are, if you dwell on that and not on what you talk about, the faith. And when we talk about faith, faith is believing in something bigger than yourself. And there's nothing bigger than yourself than the Lord God Almighty, who loves you, who believes in you, who cares for you, who will give you the strength you need to accomplish what he's called you to do. Because God, as you know, come on, Scott, I'm getting on a roll now, but God can work with failure. I know that. God can redeem failure. He cannot redeem quitting. When you quit, it's over. It ends. Failure, yeah, man, we're all there. But when you decide to quit and you just sit back and go, it's done, God will say, all right, you're fine. You're done.
Hey, when I was a young guy, somewhere along the way, when I really committed my life to the Lord, somebody said, stop looking at the hypocrites and look at Jesus. And when I stopped looking at hypocrites, and can you imagine spending your whole life distracted by a hypocrite? What a foolish move. To spend your life obsessed with other people's hypocrisy as though that they're somehow God himself. Oh my goodness. What you talk about a major miss in life. If anybody's watching this podcast and you can't get your eyes or your thinking off a hypocrite or something gone wrong, then take your eyes off of that entirely. Look squarely at the person of Jesus. He will never let you down. Never let you down. Don't look at hypocrites.
What do you mean? Wait a minute, Scott. I'm from planet wherever, and I've never heard of this Jesus. I've never heard of this whatever you're talking about. What in the world does it mean to look at Jesus or look into the face of Jesus? Or what in the world are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, you and I both know, Z, for me personally, Jesus is at the center of the greatest day of my life. I love to ask people, what's the greatest day of your life? And they tell me, and I say, can I tell you about the greatest day of my life? And the greatest day of my life was the day that I believed that what Jesus had said was true and that he actually lived his life as was presented in Scripture, but what he promised me was personal and was true. And so when I did a very simple thing, I tell people, I was in a cab the other day with this young Muslim young man from New York City, and we were talking about Jesus. We had about a 45-minute cab ride to JFK Airport. I said, I just want you to ask at some point soon in your life, Jesus, if you're true, will you show it to me? Jesus, if you're real, would you show yourself to me? I don't think Jesus is intimidated by that prayer. And so for me, that day was when I was really 17 and I asked Jesus into my life. I asked him to forgive my sin and my rebellion. I know a lot of people had done a lot of crappy stuff to me, but Z, I knew I had done just as much crappy stuff to myself and to other people as they had done to me. And I somehow saw my own sin, not the sin of people against me, but my own sin against God and against people. And I said, Lord, I'm going to focus on that side of the equation. I need to be forgiven. Yeah, those people need to stop hurting me, but that's not the issue. I need to be forgiven. And I asked Christ into my life. And I believe that Jesus was Lord, that he rose above every religious figure, every religious teacher, and that he was the Son of God. And I believed in my heart it was true, and I prayed and I welcomed him in. It sounds like, what? What? All I'm telling you is that there was a shift in my heart forever that day that Christ came into my life and his Holy Spirit.
Well, Scott, we love you, my dearest, dearest friend. And man, thank you so much for being with us today. God bless you, buddy. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my podcast. If you have any questions about today's show or would like more information on how you can bring me to your next event, please reach out and I will be sure to get back to you ASAP. Till then, have a passion-filled day.